So I'm nailing this midget when my mom walks in. And then the midge screams out, "What? A police station! Thank God! I never thought I'd be happy to see one of those things. Hey, put the donuts down! Drop the Krispy Kreme Serpico! We need your help
You do?
here!"
My house look like my father and my brother after 9 months or something.
Yeah, diggity.
Shirotabi, please forgive me for bringing you back to life. I know now that it could never work between us. As much as we wanted to, it could never be. Not because you're a rabbit, but because you're black.
Since the late 2000s, the Ghost Stories dub has been a popular fixture in the online anime community because of the liberties taken with its dubbing. Ghost Stories follows Satsuki, who after moving back to her mother's hometown, discovers that many of the ghosts previously sealed away by her mother are being freed due to the town's urbanization, and it's up to Satsuki and her friends to seal those ghosts away again. The story behind this dub has always been that the show did so poorly in Japan that the Japanese producers told the dubbing company, ADV Films, that they could have free range to change whatever they had to in order to make the show profitable. ADV was told that they couldn't change character names, the names of ghosts, or how the ghosts were defeated, but aside from that, the actors were allowed to ad-lib their lines, essentially turning the show from a children's adventure series to a raunchy comedy. This claim has been backed up by employees at ADV Films for years, but surprisingly, after only a few weeks of digging, I was able to prove that this is not the full story. And what happened to Ghost Stories has more to do with a strange obsession held by one of the key staff members at ADV Films, as well as years of misinformation and miscommunication. Unlike most anime that begin their life as manga, Ghost Stories began as a series of children's books written by Toru Tsunemitsu. Tsunemitsu was a middle school teacher who started writing the series in 1985, inspired by the ghost stories he'd hear from his students. 9 volumes were published between 1990 and 1997, and they quickly became bestsellers. In 1995, the books were adapted into a film that became the 4th highest grossing film in Japan of that year, and won a Japanese Academy Award for Best Screenplay. This spawned a series of films released throughout the 90s, a straight-to-video anime in 1996, and a Sega Saturn FMV game based off the film. In 2000, following the anime boom of the late 90s, a TV anime aired with a total of 20 episodes. While airing on Sunday evenings, the show pulled in an average viewer rating between 12 and 14%, with the lowest still being around 10%. For perspective on what makes good ratings versus bad ratings, Genesis Climber Mosquito was cancelled 13 episodes early, having received between 3 and 6% during its initial airings, while Dragon Ball, considered a success, scored an average of 9% throughout the late 80s and 90s. There's always other factors to consider when you're deeming a show successful, such as the case of Kishan, which received an average audience rating of 15.9%, but was cancelled due to the Japanese recession at the time, and one of its sponsors declaring bankruptcy almost as soon as the show went into production. That being said, Ghost Stories' 12 to 14% in the midst of an anime boom that followed the success of Evangelion was considered very high, and the show had a loyal fan base, bolstered by the success of the books and films that preceded it. The show did so well that an additional episode was created as a special, airing several months after the show completed. If you've never heard of this special, it's because in the West, it was actually moved to be episode 19, since it's set chronologically before the end of the show. This would theoretically make the episode count 21 episodes, except that episode 3, titled Am I Beautiful Kuchisake Onna, faced backlash from parental groups fighting to raise awareness for children with cleft palates, as it focused on the Japanese urban legend of Kuchisake Onna, or the slit mouth woman. This parental group claimed that the slit mouth woman's scars resembled a cleft palate, and would result in children being bullied, leading to a protest that pressured Fuji TV to pull the episode. In its place, Fuji TV aired a special edition episode, made from edited scenes of episode 1 and 2, and the episode with the slit mouth woman was never seen again, the only known trace of it being the next episode preview recorded from a fan who was recording the second episode when it originally aired. If the ratings numbers don't satisfy you, then surely the fact that only 2 episodes were enough to spark a protest, and the fact that the series received a special after it concluded, should prove that this had a following. On January 11th, 2004, premium cable channel Animax launched its first broadcast in Asia outside of Japan. The channel was available in Hong Kong, India, Singapore, and several other markets in East Asian countries, where it aired anime 24/7. Because they aired in countries like Singapore, the Philippines, and parts of Hong Kong where they have native English speakers, the anime were often aired in Japanese with English subtitles, or in the case of their more popular shows, received low-budget English dubs.
No way! Where's he getting all that spirit energy from? Of course. He's using his body's own life energy. Is he really going to sacrifice his life for that girl?
Don't die on me now, Rube.
Why would I do that? Tonight's poker night and it's my turn to make the chili.
Darn straight.
You jerk! What did you do to Grandpa?
I only dueled with him using the most valuable cards in my deck.
In 2004, Ghost Stories was dubbed in English as Ghost at School and aired on Animax.
No, please. You see, I was always alone, without any friends. Shiratabi was the only one who was ever kind to me. But Mio... The day Shiratabi died, I was broken-hearted. I was all alone again. You see, my only friend had been taken away from me. But now, Shiratabi's back with me.
Being on a premium cable channel and aired late at night, which is when they usually aired their dub programs, it's likely it didn't do well ratings-wise. A year later, the series would make its way to America, where ADV Films, best known for the original dub of Neon Genesis Evangelion, gained the rights to the series. The dub was directed by Stephen Foster, who encouraged his voice actors to ad-lib jokes, turning the series into the black comedy we know it as today. According to ADV Films, this was encouraged by the Japanese rights holders, who said the show did so poorly in Japan that they could do anything to make the show sell, as long as they didn't change the character names, names of ghosts, how to defeat the ghost, and plots of the episodes. For years, this has been the explanation online as to how the anime became what it is, but to me this didn't make sense. For starters, a lot of the behind-the-scenes information circulating the internet regarding the Ghost Stories dub comes from a very poorly written article on the site ranker.com, and this article is even cited on the official English-language Wikipedia page for the series. The website mostly consists of clickbait articles and user-created lists, seemingly attempting to emulate the website BuzzFeed. One of the most egregious errors in this Ghost Stories article is that the producer, Aniplex, is mistakenly referred to as Animax, causing confusion as Animax did air the show on their channel, but had no ownership over the series and had no part in negotiating the overseas license. This led to my first theory as to how the Ghost Stories dub came into being, which was miscommunication. It's possible that when the Japanese rights holders sold the show to ADV, they told them the show did poorly airing in other Asian markets on Animax, which ADV may have easily misunderstood as thinking they meant the show did poorly in Japan. ADV was allegedly told to do whatever you have to in order to sell the show, which doesn't fit the circumstances at all. It's been confirmed that ADV was told they couldn't change the character names, names of ghosts, core plots, etc., which sounds like an attempt to preserve the integrity of the show while also feeling somewhat complacent towards it, which may have been a result of the show doing poorly in reruns, plus the lack of merchandising for the show and the show doing poorly in other Asian markets. Another point of contention is that both ADV and their reincarnation Sentai Filmworks are notorious for changing characters, dialogue, and sometimes the entire tone of a show without the consent of the Japanese owners. For example, Sentai's dub of Guen Saga, which started as a standard dub, but after the first DVD set received middling reviews, they decided to do this.
The Chancellor of Rigol, Andonus. Is there something you wish to say?
No, nothing.
Are you sure about that?
You are kidding me. If you have something to ask, perhaps you are thinking that there is something which I must say to you. Is that...
Wait, there's Miel. I am sorry. Forgive me, Father. But I want to leave the kingdom in his hands.
Princess, about that. We just got word. Lord Mial has been assassinated. I know, and only 14 years old.
This isn't an outtake reel, this is the official dub, but more accurately, it's a middle finger. And by no coincidence, the man who directed this dub is also the man behind the Ghost Stories dub, Stephen Foster. One of Foster's earliest examples of these changes, which he playfully calls Fosterizations, was in the show Orphan. On his own website, Foster proudly claims that he changed a character in that show to be gender non-binary when they weren't in the original, as well as changing handfuls of dialogue, which led to such harsh fan backlash that he was forced to make sure the latter half of the show kept closer to the original Japanese script. In his partially biographical book, The Last Alias, Foster talks about his life and work. Foster worked at an advertising agency while writing screenplays in his free time, and at the time of being hired by ADV Films had just been denied representation from an agent in LA, where he was trying to sell his work. Foster had never heard of anime but applied for the job and was hired. As shown, Orphan wasn't the only time Foster changed an anime simply for his own pleasure. In 2004, ADV attained the rights to the show Super Milk-chan, a low-budget surreal comedy series full of references to Japanese pop culture. Unsure how a faithful dub of such an odd show would do, and desperate to get more titles on Cartoon Network, an Americanized version of the show was created, with Foster serving as the ADR director and writer. Alongside editing the visuals, this dub also added live action segments, seemingly inspired by The Office. However, these scenes are excruciatingly boring. The overall plot occurring over the segments isn't clear, and focus jumps between so many different characters with such aimless dialogue, it's hard to get a grasp of anyone's personality or what anyone is supposed to be doing. According to Foster's website, both dubs were offered to Cartoon Network, who opted for the faithful dub. 1 year later, Foster was told by Griffin Vance, one of ADV Films' attorneys, that he was going to be working on a new show that bombed in Japan. It did so poorly that they didn't even charge a licensing fee, and they said ADV could do whatever they wanted so long as they follow a short list of criteria. This dub was Ghost Stories, and this account came straight from Foster himself. Despite my dislike of how Foster puts his own interest before the product he's working on or fans of that product, I believe him when he says this is how it happened. But then the issue arises that we already know Ghost Stories didn't do poorly in Japan. We don't know exactly what Vance was referring to when he first reached out to Foster, but there are two prevailing theories. Number 1, Vance was told that Ghost Stories did poorly in reference to its run on Animax, and since Animax ran in Asia, he figured they were talking about Japan. A simple mistake. Number 2, Vance saw the contract was extremely loose in its wording and brought it to Foster knowing how much he enjoyed personalizing scripts. It's unclear if Vance created this story through a genuine misunderstanding, if he was given the wrong information by someone else, or if he created the story simply because he enjoyed Foster's work and wanted to see more of it. How the misinformation was passed around ADV is unclear, but after a bit of investigation, we actually do know why the Japanese side was so loose and didn't charge a licensing fee. According to a Japanese Ghost Stories fan blog, there was a prevailing theory in Japan that the show was cancelled due to its graphic nature. Despite its popularity among children, it was garnering a lot of disdain from parents due to its dark imagery and the Kuchisaki Onna controversy. It didn't help that at the time, Fuji TV's slogan was Fuji TV for mothers and kids. So the theory was that it was cancelled because it was deemed unacceptable for families. However, it turns out even Japan has rumors about this show perpetuated for years. And in actuality, it seems like what happened with Ghost Stories is simply that it was concocted as a filler program. Prior to Ghost Stories' premiere, Fuji TV wanted to move the time slot of One Piece from Wednesday night to Sunday at 7:30 p.m. This time slot was occupied by GTO, which was expected to end in September of 2000. But Fuji TV didn't want to change the time slot immediately, as they saw a large ratings drop when Rurouni Kenshin changed time slots abruptly, following the anime's production shift from Studio Gallop to Studio Dean. Thinking it was better to wait for the start of the spring anime season, Fuji TV decided to create a filler program to fill that time slot until it was time for One Piece to make the change. GTO was published by Kodansha, so they wanted another Kodansha title to fill that time slot in the meantime before they could give it to Shueisha. The School Ghost Stories books are published by Kodansha, so production began on a 20-episode Ghost Stories anime utilizing a lot of the same staff as GTO. In Japan, the show had virtually no merchandising too, which supports the theory that Ghost Stories was created to fill that time slot between GTO and One Piece without fear of a ratings drop. But despite being so popular, the show was never meant to stay around, and once it completed, all parties involved simply moved on. ADV said they were never charged a licensing fee, but this could be another way of saying that the title was thrown in as part of a bulk purchase, where if a licensee buys a certain amount of shows, they may receive a show for free. This was very popular back in the day, and since Ghost Stories was just a show meant to fill a time slot, it makes sense that the contract would only have the basic requirements. The idea that the Japanese owners told ADV to do anything in order to sell the show is absurd. Not just because we know it was created as a filler show, but because even to this day, Japanese companies are notorious for not caring about the Western market. In short, Ghost Stories was created to fill an empty time slot until the end of an anime season, and despite popularity, the studio didn't care about it after it was done. It was licensed by ADV, and here's where my speculation starts, it had a loose contract which Griffin Vance, who was not just a lawyer but also a producer and occasional background voice, brought it to Foster so he could do what he always loved doing. In conclusion, I think the Ghost Stories dub did more harm than good. It permanently gave everyone a negative opinion of a decent horror anime, and its popularity on YouTube justified Stephen Foster in his agenda to change anime scripts for fun. That's all I can call it too, is changing anime scripts for fun. He's not working for 4Kids where he needs to edit these for TV. He's literally just taking anime and living out his failed dream of being a screenwriter. He doesn't even seem to like anime, he just likes the ones that he writes. And he'll constantly talk about how Ghost Stories is called the best dub ever or the most controversial dub. It's crazy that just clips of it on YouTube getting popular were enough to give him an ego, but I know that most people who watch those clips haven't seen the show because they don't really care about the show, they just think it's a funny story. But the story behind it is what's false. And years before the Ghost Stories dub, there were similar rumors about the show Samurai Pizza Cats. People used to say the original show was a serious drama, and that it was adapted without any scripts, and that the voice actors recorded their lines drunk. These rumors led to everyone who knew about the show touting it as the funniest thing imaginable. But in actuality, it was a run-of-the-mill children's dub full of puns, fourth wall breaking jokes, and cheesy one-liners you'd hear in any 90s kids show. In the mid-2000s, Funimation had shows like Sergeant Frog and Shin-Chan, which also overhauled their dub scripts. But these were made with the honest intention of making the show more entertaining for their target audience, while Foster's dubs are made to entertain Stephen Foster. While making this video, I constantly asked myself, if the show hadn't gotten a gag dub, would it have garnered anything of merit, or would it have been forgotten like so many other anime from that time? Is it better that it's remembered for being bad as opposed to not being remembered at all? The situation isn't black and white, so I think it's best that you just take the information you have and make your own conclusion. The goal of this video isn't to make you hate the Ghost Stories dub, it's to give you more accurate information so as a viewer you can make a more informed decision on how you feel. Now if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go work on my Toei Fushigi comedy video. Thanks for watching, fuck the Mets.